Hi Gina.
Hi Ione. Hi everyone. I'm Gina, the senior editor of Polyester.
And I'm Ione, the founding editor-in-chief of Polyester. This is the Polyester Podcast, a feminist pop culture podcast dissecting the discourse on a weekly basis.
Before we start, if you're a fan of this podcast, please make sure to like, rate and subscribe and review. And if you, why is that not in there? Why have I not been saying it this whole time? Sorry. If you're a fan of this podcast, please make sure to like, rate, subscribe and review. And if you really love us, you can sign up for a podcast membership where you can join our WhatsApp chat, get access to our research each week and get on our Instagram close friends for only £3 a month. Do we have any reviews, Ione?
We do. Another lovely one with a funny, well, we'll see. 5 stars, give it a shot. Fun podcast, pretty good takes. The hosts antagonise each other a lot, which I find distracting, but I appreciate the cultural commentary overall. This is by Screw a Nickname, in the US of A.
Brilliant. I don't think we antagonise each other that much anymore. I think we dropped that from our shtick.
Our repertoire. I don't know.
What are you planning?
So, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about, we were spurred on by a Dazed article and a New Yorker article to talk about how...
On a general mood.
Cultural mood.
On the internet.
Online.
Yes.
On social media, particularly.
You may have seen terms such as Neurospicy enter your repertoire over the past year, 2 years.
Let me say what we're talking about.
I was going to do a lovely intro to it.
Oh.
Go on.
Go on then.
No, go on.
Talking about how being neurodivergent has emerged as a subculture online.
Yeah, I suppose in which, in so much as to say that it won't come as a surprise to anyone that it seems like a lot of people are getting diagnosed with ADHD, getting diagnosed with autism, getting diagnosed with mental health diagnoses and other things. And you'll probably hear it a lot that ADHD made me realise, TikTok made me realise I had ADHD, TikTok made me realise I was autistic, etc, etc, etc. So we're talking about it, what it means.
What it stands for.
Yeah.
What it represents.
I mean, I think subculture is maybe slightly the wrong word to use. Because I would say it's really widespread, even our litmus test. Over the past few years, this kind of lexicon and ways of categorizing behaviors, I think, has entered the mainstream in a big, big way. My mum would say this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think subculture implies that it's contained to a certain group, age or social standing, whereas I think the group in question is internet users, which is everyone, especially TikTok users, which is increasingly everyone.
Yeah, you can't really say that it's a subculture when it is what is your shared interest there then? What's your shared politic that you...
Well, it's being autistic or having ADHD.
That's what I mean, that doesn't apply to just a small group of people or a certain culture. It's not a subculture.
Well, I suppose the wording of subculture is to speak to the fact that it's something that has gained popularity through a set of quote unquote niche behaviours, I suppose, or shared behaviour, and the shared behaviour is being neurodivergent.
Yeah, I guess I see it more as I don't know, what's the difference between community and subculture?
I mean, I think there's definitely ways in which certain subsections of a neurodivergent community can be grouped together based on aesthetic choices or taste, but I would say that that's a much more granular thing, and also speak to how we are sold things on the internet, which we are going to go into actually. I suppose it's more that being neurodivergent has become a personality type or an identity rather than a health diagnosis.
Yeah, I think that's the nail on the head here is we're interested in how neurodivergence has become a form of personality and identity.
A personality trait,
yeah. Like you said.
Which is something that I picked apart, not about neurodiversity in particular, but about physical health and disability and chronic illness in my book, and how that, due to the rise of community sharing on the internet in particular, so you will see I'm part of X community or Y community, and certain people gathering around Instagram accounts or Discords or whatever to share not only share information, but also like connect with like-minded people has caused an uptick in people treating their health conditions as if they are a personality trait. Like, it wasn't until 2019, I was diagnosed in 2013, I think. I can't remember. I was 19.
Yeah, 2013.
No, that would have been I was 21.
No, it's not.
Okay, sorry. I can't do maths. We all know I can't do maths. I was diagnosed in 2013, and I don't think I had a chronically ill friend until 2019. So that's like 6 years. And in those 6 years, there wasn't Instagram accounts, there wasn't like communities built around chronic illness, there wasn't any of these things. And there's a lot of positives in being able to find a community that have shared values based on a marginalised experience. Like, obviously we know this is, you know, like marginalisation 101, of which we have many intersecting marginalisations. But I think with health, it's a slippery slope. And through social media, now it's a slippery slope. Like, for example, I mean, this was happening on Tumblr 10 years ago, and we'll, like, you know, divert into neurodiversity in a minute. But I think my point being is that it's become a lot more accessible to seek out information that's unverified about health conditions you think you have, whether you do or whether you do not. I'm sure if I was 19 now, I would have, like, Googled my symptoms loads, and then, or before that, because somehow the algorithm knows you, there would have been something that pops up like, do you have X, Y, and Z? You have this. Like, how many times have we been victim to it with PCOS?
Literally endless time.
Like, drink this and you won't have PCOS anymore.
Yeah, my new one is light therapy machines for your facial hair, which is nice.
And, like, I've bought those supplements, I've done this, I've done that, because, like, that's a newer diagnosis that I received in adulthood when all of this was rife, like, as opposed to, anyway. I don't know if that was a massive aside.
No, I think it's interesting, like, is being able to find those communities, I get more easily a positive or a negative.
Well, I think that's what we're getting into. So, an interesting part of this day's article by Rhiannon Payton is a quote where she says, "The mainstream is transforming neurodiversity into an aspiration we can all buy into. But the rise of what some call TikTok's sick role subculture," which, like, in short basically means that, like, young people go on TikTok made because of probably its growth in popularity during COVID, meant that people were filming in their houses, meaning we were seeking, like, hyper relatable content. So how the algorithm farm works is that the more vulnerable you are, the more engagement you have, which has led to people talking about perhaps, like, more explicitly taboo things than they would have in previous times, which obviously lends itself to, like, neurodiversity, disability and chronic illness in particular. But the rise of what some call TikTok's sick role subculture seems to be doing more harm than good. A recent study in the Journal of Comprehensive Psychiatry found that teenagers' exposure to it during an important phase of personality development raises the likelihood that they'll develop symptoms of the disorders they see online. Wasn't this thing a couple of years ago when, like, loads of girls started getting tics and stuff?
Yeah.
Evidence that social media is a vehicle of transmission for social contagion of self-diagnosed medical illness conditions is mounting, which, like, it's hard not to see it. Do you know what I mean? The writer in this article cites, like, one of Brad Trammell's meme dumps, where he rounded up, like, 12, obviously not 12, you can't have 12 on Instagram, but, like, 10 things where it's like, this cozy game I've made to, like, tackle ADHD, or, like, 5 things I do to, like, help my ex, or, like, 4 ways I manage my Y, or, like, 5 items that will help you with Z.
I thought X was a diagnosis when he said that.
No, I just don't want to be too, like, pointed in this, like, because obviously it's a serious thing and people
definitely
are diagnosed with it, like, and have it, but it's more the way that it's been used as, like, there's kind of 2 streams to this. Like, one, content bait, that, like, the need for it arised out of a real need of an underserved community. Like, obviously people that are not neurotypical, people that are disabled, people that are chronically ill are, like, woefully underserved by especially the national health system. But instead of, like, you know, growing maybe what is the most helpful part of it, like in CHAM's research, it says that, you know, like, a lot of these things are just good for you even if you're not, like, neurodiverse. Like, it teaches you how to be well organized, like teaches you coping mechanisms for certain things that are not like net harmful in, you know, the grand scheme of life if you choose to adopt them or not.
Yeah, and also like representation as well for like makes you feel less alone in things.
I'm talking about if people that aren't necessarily neurodiverse. So
no, but I mean like, I don't know, sorry, go on.
But then what we're seeing is that like that being capitalized through people that want to be big on social media and that can, you know, like funnel this through an individualist lens to make their own career out of it, similar to what we saw being done in fourth wave feminism by Florence Given, for example. Or B, health is actually such a more dangerous beast to fuck around with. Like, obviously women's rights is also extremely important, but in modern life, like, health is directly linked to commerce capitalism, in which that, like, even though we have a free NHS here, our drugs, we buy drugs from pharmaceutical companies who leverage the price of drugs. So, for example, in the Dazed article, a growing market is capitalising on the desirability of diagnosis and as an indisputable medical claim to uniqueness. Big Pharma was the first to move in, gatekeeping vital healthcare for profit. Takeda, the company behind the ADHD drug Vyvanse, I'm sorry if I've said it wrong, but it's a drug name, you know, we'll live, has contributed to a global medication shortage after a 16-year-old patent preventing the manufacture of cheaper unbranded generics. So this is what, like, Big Pharma's evil for, right? They patent something and it means you can't sell it for a generic price. Like, there's only a few generic drugs we have, like paracetamol and ibuprofen, and that's why they're so dirt fucking cheap, because like no one owns the patent to them. The reason why pharma is such a bustling business or whatever is because it's literally capitalizing on problems. So if they're seeing an increase in demand, they're going to be capitalizing on it, and really we're just like feeding into a cog that makes health more evil, which everyone knows is a big sticking point for me. But even beyond that, like, certain medication is getting their own merch made. Like, get a hoodie with Lexapro on it, which I think is like citalopram or sertraline here for us. But I remember when fashion brands have done that, it was either Ashley Williams or Fashion Brand Company, like, they got so much backlash for it. But it's like, if you're getting it from source, it's all right. Or maybe this was a few years ago, so it kind of shows how deep into the wormhole of, like, making this a lifestyle that we've come. Like, people are happy to wear their medication on their chest and like buy it from the people that are selling us overpriced medication. It's really dark. Like, I find it really dark.
Yeah, we're fucked from the whole romanticize your life thing. Like, not every, like, I think it kind of reminds me of body neutrality a bit, where like you need to like neutralize these things in your life, like not make it like a glamorous thing, because that when you glamorizing it for yourself to like help you get through the day makes sense, but once you put that out into the world, it becomes something that's been romanticized, so people want to like be a part of that community because they see it as glamorous, and like they might not necessarily use those words to like describe why they want to be part of that community, but at the end of the day, the reason anyone wants to be part of any community is for like that sense of belonging. And like that's like what I mean here by like glamorization. Like, you've made it like this thing that people can come together and be like, that's me as well, like I'm romanticizing mine as well. And then people want to be a part of that because they just want to have something that they belong to.
That, I believe, is a good place for us to take a break. We will be back in a second. Hello, welcome back.
Back again. All of them bitches, I'm better than it. Sorry. A brief reprieve.
On what you're saying about that, the Dazed article also goes on to say to keep this new subculture in line. I mean, I would say the Dazed article has a critical lens, which is not unwelcome, but can sometimes seem short, I would say. Also, I'm very critical of this, so anyway.
There's two sides to it, isn't there?
To keep this new subculture in line, social media turned diagnosis into an identity, a creation of neurodivergent influencers basing their entire personas on a condition, which is often only subject of their content rather than presenting themselves as whole, nuanced individuals. The more diluted these identities become, the easier they are to co-opt and commodify. Keeping users engaged in the short-form visual world of TikTok and Instagram requires creators to flatten their identity. I talk about this loads in my book. Context is removed, symptoms are generalised or even fabricated to the point where they can apply to anyone. Again, we've already kind of spoken about how that's not necessarily a bad thing, because lots of these like tips and tricks or whatever to like hack your life if you're neurospicy aren't like negative, like everyone could probably use a bit of it, but it's when it's taken to like such an extreme that means people, places and things can commodify it, that we need to have a critical lens on it. And I feel that stuff like this is really hard to be critical of, because obviously we lean towards like wanting to believe people when they're saying they're sick, and that's already such a skewed bias of like people not being believed. Like there's a reason why so many people, you know, go forever in their lives like not having a diagnosis, and then there's a light bulb moment. But then overdiagnosis also isn't good in and of itself, or also like completely bypassing diagnosis, which is something that I see on the internet quite a lot. And like I know that's contentious because like the waiting lists for things like ADHD assessment are so long, but I think as someone that is ill, it's really important, even despite how frustrating it is at times, to have like a formal framework for like how to deal with something. And by creating neurodiversity as a personality rather than like a medical condition, people kind of don't treat it like a medical condition, dare I say. Like if it becomes just a personality, you lose the seriousness of it being a medical diagnosis as well.
Yeah, and I think the crux of the matter remains is, why are you seeking a diagnosis? Are you seeking a diagnosis so you can get better accessibility to things and better understanding of what you need, and also a better access to like the medication you may need? Or are you doing it so then like you can say like, oh, I've been formally diagnosed, and then use it in a way to like connect with other people on the internet in your community in those spaces where people are like, well, you've not been formally diagnosed, or to use it even for like clout. Like I think is like that sounds so fucking dark to say, but people are like using it to be like, I am the formal definition of this. Yeah, like, I'm the person who can have the TikTok account that can tell you like oh, do you love reading? You might, if you find yourself reading for hours, you might have ADHD. If you've never picked up a book, you also might have ADHD. And you sometimes read, I think you've got ADHD. It's like these like fucking vague symptoms that are endlessly applicable, but then the source of who that's coming from is seen as like trusted because they've received a diagnosis. So like this diagnosis becomes something that's like a trophy goal for you, rather than something that can help you like navigate the healthcare system. Like when I had like a very bad nervous breakdown, like maybe like, what was it, like 7 years ago, and I went into therapy, and I also fixated on really wanting a diagnosis and being like, what's wrong with me? Like what do I, like I need to know like what's wrong with me, what's the formal title for that? And my therapist was like, what would you gain actually from that? Like you're not in school anymore, so you're not going to get like help with like work. Like your work is very accommodating to what you already like do, like what you need, your needs are. So what do you get out of having that label? Like what benefits you from being labeled? And I think that's like really interesting when you apply that like through the lens of having grown up on the internet. So Rebecca Jennings wrote an article for Vox, and in it she wrote the quote saying like, the internet is a categorization machine. Like that's how the internet works. Like it worked on forums, that's how communities were built on there. That's like how any part of it, like you go on like Facebook's such a shit.
You go on Facebook because you are your mother.
You'd like go on Facebook and then you join all these different groups, and then that's like how you navigate those spaces, because you found like all these different categories of the other things that you like. So why do we've grown up like processing information that way, and like needing something to have a label so we can access more of the things that we like through the internet? And it's the same thing, like we've now started to like apply that to ourselves, whereas like I think as a person we are so much more nebulous than that. We are so much more than the definitions of what we are. Like we are those things at our core, but we're also not.
I think that's like all very true, but I think in this case too, it's a case of asking who benefits from you seeking a diagnosis and like being obsessed with having this certain thing, not just necessarily like why would you? Because like I think it would be easy to be like, oh yeah, but you know, like I'm not trying to be an ADHD influencer, I'm not trying to be an autism influencer, like I just want to understand myself better. But then it's like, well, who benefits from that? Like who is benefiting from you probably spending a lot of money to try and get diagnosed, because diagnoses, as I've already said, are like very hard to pertain on the NHS. And like how is this content not only feeding into how you feel about yourself, but feeding into like a market that is capitalizing on it?
Yeah, and if you think like how your data as well, from like researching into it more and more and more, like it's like you said, like you get these videos which are like, do you think you have ADHD? And then say you go down that rabbit hole, and then you can buy like an Etsy storefront that's like actually drop shipping, that's selling like books that'll tell you how to like best navigate like your specific mental health. But the end line there is, the goal of that is still to make money. Like, it's still so like tied to capitalism.
And then there's a really interesting point in that Vox article that you already mentioned that says like, groups for people whom society often marginalises, like, say, those with mental illness or who share a common history of trauma, must enforce an element of exclusivity in order to be useful. The trouble starts when these identity markers are used as a rhetorical tool. But then also, I feel like it's just so, like, not to like bang on a drum, but like there's a huge...
You make that up?
No.
I've never heard that phrase before.
There's a huge, like, you know, we would think by looking at all these TikToks, having these conversations, and I'm not saying that being neurodivergent is not a, like, what's the word, desirable quality, but like marginalisation is a word for a reason. Like, people that are disabled and people that are chronically ill and people that have neurodivergent illnesses or whatever, I don't know what the like
conditions, I suppose.
Yeah, conditions. Society treats them like shit. Society treats disabled people extremely terribly. Like, step out of like the attention economy, like we were talking about yesterday, and it's not fucking helpful to have an ADHD diagnosis in your job, because like your job will probably just reject you, or like once you ask for those like reasonable adjustments to be put in place, they're not going to do that for you and you're going to have to leave your job. Like,
even like applying for jobs, like, yeah, they've got certain DNI tick boxes and they're like, disclose any of your health reasons, and you might think, because you're told like, oh yeah, disclose everything, and then when they hire you they'll be able to accommodate you. They're not going to fucking hire you. Like, they're not going to make their lives easier. And I know that sounds so like dark, and I'm sure there's bosses out there who would look past that. But at the end of the day, like, the head honcho is looking for productivity, and by being neurodivergent, by being disabled, you're impacting your ability to be productive in those spaces.
We're making like basically a cottage society on the internet of people who think that like we live in a utopia in which difference is celebrated, while ignoring the fact that in the physical world, like, that is not the case. Like, you can be a staunch advocate and have like hundreds of thousands of followers for like your specific marginalized condition on TikTok, but yeah, you might not be able to get a job. Like, you won't be able to get benefits because, as like the government have unveiled, personal independence payment, which is like the disability benefit in the UK, they want to change it into vouchers. So like disabled people can't spend their money on fags, like as if we're less, you know, like we have less liberty than anyone else to spend money on cigarettes if we want to, or like booze or whatever. Like, we're so hyper individualized that we think of like people like this as having some sort of superpower or whatever, but then in the real world, like, people that seriously suffer and like can't get jobs and can't do whatever are so highly marginalized that like leads to like death in many cases, like really, really, really serious consequences. These people being outcast from mainstream society, which is why the internet is probably such a haven for these people where they feel understood and accepted. But again, like, by piggybacking on it all, the only people that profit are Big Pharma and, like, you know, the three influencers that can make some money off it. And everyone else suffers because disabled people are treated like shit all the fucking time.
And of course, those influencers are going to peddle to you that you need to go get your diagnosis, you need to do this, you need to buy this, you need to change your lifestyle to be like this.
Because they want you to sell you more stuff.
They want to sell you more stuff. They want to get more followers. They want to... it's just so difficult. It's just so difficult, and we need to like stop being like seeing it as individualized, like you said. Like, it needs to stop being like, oh, this is what you can do to make your life as a neurodivergent person better, but you need to be more, it needs to be a wider circle of net of being like, well, what can we do to make society better for neurodivergent people? And that includes me, who's maybe on like, not me personally, sorry.
And that includes me, Gina Tonic. You can follow Sister Gina.
No, I mean, like, that includes people who are like on the functioning scale of that, of being neurodivergent, and the people who are on maybe a less like able to function in society end of the scale. We need to change it for everyone there. Like, there's an essay for Sluggish by Jessie Meadows, which says, why is everyone online autistic now? And it was so interesting. I thought it was really engaging, like actually breaking down like why we see that, and saying that like on TikTok 29% of the users create the content, how many of these people are autistic because people who are autistic are drawn to interacting with the internet because they've got like slow processing. Yeah. And that means like you can think about what you want to say and like all this other things. Like, please go read it if you want to. But I found it like so engaging, like explaining why there seems to be more neurodivergent people online because of the percentages of how many people use online, and the percentages of people who are neurodivergent find themselves better to communicate online. But the final part of it was, we need to reject this deserving/non-deserving framing of neurodivergent and recognise the potential for solidarity in the fact that we all live under a society that requires our illness to function. And I thought that was so like, we do need to like all come together really at the end of this and like think like we don't need to be like, you're diagnosed, you're undiagnosed, you're not ADHD enough, they're too ADHD. Like, we need to remove it from being an identity and make it be like a social movement to make sure that society can accommodate everyone. Bam, bam, bam.
And with that, bid you adieu.
So long.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Ione.
Thank you, Sihan, for the research, and Olivia for editing, and everyone else for listening.
Thank you.